Hi, I'm Andy Shalal. I'm the owner of Busboys and Poets. We are so happy to have Rock Newman and the Rock Newman Show join our tribe here. We are a tribe. This is a place where racial and cultural connections are consciously uplifted, a place where art, culture, and politics intentionally collide. This is a space to take a deliberate pause and feed your mind, body, and soul. We believe by creating such a space, we can actually change our community, change D.C., and change the world for the better. And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Good morning, world. It is another spectacular day here in Washington, D.C., Saturday, November the 2nd, 2013. Indeed, we are broadcasting live from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets, 14th and V Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. Those of you watching, you've got time to get in your car and cruise on down for some great breakfast and some great conversation. We have something this morning for everyone. The guest in my first hour is Sandy Mejais. She is the owner, along with her husband Carlos, of the Olde Town School for Dogs. Now, friends who've known me all of my life are shocked, amazed, and dazed that I, Rock Newman, am talking about a subject dealing with canines, because they've known me all of my life as someone who has been anti-canine, anti-dog, always got complaints, always has criticism about dogs and their owners. And I have Sandy Mejais on there, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in my life that has made such a huge change. We'll get back to that in just a moment. So switching up, in the second hour, we're going to have Washington, D.C., the chairman of the city council, Phil Mendelson. He really is the quiet guy in Washington, D.C. politics, but he's a long-term politician in the district. And we're going to talk to him about all things dealing with politics, what the issues are that most concern the city, what some of our strengths are, what some of the failures have been, what are the challenges, and what's ahead. We've got an interesting year shaping up with a mayoral election coming up in 2014. So Phil Mendelson will be weighing in on all of that. And then in the third hour, something that I think certainly impacts most human beings is a lady we're going to have. Her name is Emily Griffin, and she has a company called Happy Parents, Happy Babies. And it's about parenting. It is about folks who are parents getting themselves in a state of being where they can be the best parent. Being a parent, of course, you guys have heard me say on a number of occasions, being a mother is the most important job description that exists amongst human beings. And she's going to come and talk to us about ways, techniques, mechanisms, strategies that might make you a better parent for your children, and also share some advice on how to deal with some issues that you may have with your children. So it's a show of variety today, a little something for everyone. But first, let me welcome Sandy Mejais. Welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
Thank you, Rock.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
I'm happy to be
Okay,
here.
so let's start here. I've been a lifelong person that have been anti-dog. I don't like dogs. Don't bring them around me. You can love those stinky things if you want, but don't bring any around me. And I posted on Facebook this week, for those of you that don't already know, my wife and I, a month ago, we got a chocolate Havanese. And the chocolate Havanese is a lovable little adorable thing. And I posted on Facebook this week, said, we've fallen so in love with Mani. Her name is Mani. We gave her that name because in Sanskrit, when folks are chanting in yoga and that sort of thing, it's Omani Pagnion. And Omani means the jewel in the lotus. And so she has become our jewel, so her name is Mani. So I said, we've fallen so in love with Mani because she's cute, cuddly, intelligent. She's mostly obedient. She's crazy. She loves to give attention. She craves attention. So, trying to be good dog parents, we went to the Olde Town School for Dogs to get taught how to be good dog parents. So when we first walked in and started to tell you about our puppy and our plight, that we've been married 30 years, never had a dog, One of the first things you said was, it's just, you're the kind of people, it's just going to be a matter of time. That dog is going to end up sleeping in your bed. Why did you say that?
Well, you know, if I had not known that you didn't like dogs previously, you were so smitten with that dog. The second you walked in the door, I said, oh boy, these guys are crazy for this dog. And not that everybody's not, but you do have a jewel. I mean, Monty is an exceptionally lovely dog, and the karma was there between you, Dee Dee, and the dog. I know what's in the future for you.
And let me tell you something. And here, I think Dee Dee didn't want me to say this, but you know, we read a lot of things that said, don't allow the dog to get into the bed, to get into your bed. Don't do it. Don't allow it. You know, you've got to be the pack leader or something like that, and she's got to stay down, and you've got to stay higher, and that sort of thing.
Wait, is she in the bed?
Excuse me?
Is she in the bed already?
Well, I'm about to tell you. You know, the little baby seemed to be okay with that for a while. We got her when she was 12 weeks old, and seemed to be okay. But then she started putting her little paws up on the side because we were up there, and she wanted to be us. And at some point, Dee Dee said, "Okay, I'm just going to do it for 5 minutes, you know. And I'm going to take this old robe that I was going to throw away, and I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to let her come up in it." And long story short, that started something, and she's been there on a fairly regular basis. Now, we do pick her up and put her in her crate later on. So she's never spent the night, but she has been in the bed, and she's staying in there a little longer and a little longer. Is that typical?
You know, it really depends on the family and the dog.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind your dog sleeping in the bed, once the dog is housebroken and no longer destructive, I don't have any problem with the dog being in the bed, provided it doesn't have aggression issues or some sort of temperament problem that would preclude that. And, you know, many people enjoy having their dog in the bed. The main thing is we have to make sure that she's completely housebroken, because you don't want her jumping off the bed and having an accident or having that accident on the bed, which is why better for a while to keep them in their crate, especially overnight when you're sleeping and you can't supervise what's happening.
Well, this love affair, in part, is because she has been such a wonderful baby. I mean, smart, easy to train, absolutely housebroken in a short period of time. A couple of accidents, but nothing in the last 3 weeks or so. So, I mean, the affection goes pouring forth. And, you know, I've described it, Sandy, and I'd like for you to talk about this, because in reading some of your material, I see that you guys have contributed to the well-being and the care for over 20,000 dogs. The Olde Town School for Dogs has been in existence since 1975. So in 38 years, you guys have dealt with almost 20,000 dogs. What is it in sort of your studied research, hands-on, that so opens you up in a way? And for me, it's like nothing else. It's a shock. It's a surprise. It's like a chamber in my soul had been screwed tight, never to be opened, and this little baby has opened it, and it's just like love and affection, and I've turned into straight up mush. What makes that happen? What is it? Why?
You know, I think that, you know, dogs don't judge you. They're always there to greet you when you come home. They don't have any problem with, you know, what you're thinking or what you're doing on any given day or week, or what your work schedule's like. They'll take what you can give them, and they give triple fold back. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have that old saying, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. And that's what a lot of people do around here. I mean, that's why we train so many dogs. And, you know, we're lucky. Most of the people who come to us want a family member. Yeah. That's why they come to us, and they do the puppy head start, and they do the day school or the private lessons, because they want the dog to be a family member. We've sort of set the bar in Olde Town and in the area for good behavior. And so now people expect that they should be able to take their dog places, do things with their dog, and all of that creates a camaraderie that is just, it's like no other.
You know, you say they don't judge you, and I've heard that, and I think that's very much the case. I noticed one thing. I had eaten a dinner about a week ago, and it was heavy on garlic. And I woke up the next morning, and I'm the one that gets her up and goes to take her to do her business and that sort of thing. And I think that garlic was still pretty strong, and so I, went to say, give Daddy a kiss, and she turned her head away. She might not have done it, but she didn't like that bad breath, I don't think. Let me ask you, you said for the audience that might be looking in here, can you please tell me, when people are considering, let's kind of go basic, when folks are considering to get a puppy, what are the main considerations or the many considerations that should be thought of prior to doing so?
Well, there's many considerations, and the really obvious ones are size, amount of exercise the dog requires, shedding, non-shedding, the allergies that might be in the family. I mean, there's some very basic things that people have to consider. And then when they narrow down what they want, they need to look at the history of the breed or breed combination that they're thinking of. And, for example, if they want a dog that's going to play ball, then and really love to retrieve and work with them, then they may not be as inclined to want a hound, who is more inclined to want to sniff and chase things and hunt. So, I mean, you have to look at the history of the breed or breed combination that the dog is, what it was bred for. Many people get rescues now, and sometimes you don't know what breed they are. But you do want to try to find as much history as you can on a particular dog that you're looking at picking out.
And so, what advice do you give for the person that is asking the question, should I get a newborn puppy? Should I do rescue? I mean, there seems to be an awful lot of emphasis these days, and this stuff is all new for me. I mean, I just ignored, didn't pay any attention to, didn't want to hear anything about it for such a long time. But now, being involved in that canine world, I don't even like to call my baby a dog. That's like she's a puppy. There seems to be a big move underfoot to rescue dogs that are already like in kennels or in pounds or that sort of thing.
Rescue is changed so much since we opened the school in 1975. You did not see the rescues that we see now. There's a lot of really good people out there. They're bringing dogs up from kill shelters that are, further south or in other places.
Now, when you say kill shelter, what is that?
The shelters that do high volume and cannot keep the dogs very long. The dogs come in, they're lovely dogs. They have 5 days, and then they're out. They because of space and money, and they put them to sleep.
Right.
So that's it's a pressing need to find homes for these dogs. But that said, I mean, I think that the dog is going to be with your family for a long time. It needs to fit in with your family, and some people want to shape the dog to be exactly what they want. Or it may not turn out that way, but at least they would like that shot. So those folks would prefer to get a specific breed and raise the dog themselves. Other people are happy to open their homes to a dog and help it fit in as a rescue. It's really a very individual choice.
So one day I'm at your facility. I pull up to your facility. I see this long limousine out there. And I come inside, and there are these dogs that are walking around, and I'm looking to see some famous person or somebody of significance, and I just kind of see people kind of normal, but I do see, there was a driver standing by the limo, and then there was someone else in. And come to find out that was the driver for the puppy, for the dog?
That's correct. Yeah, we have some dogs that do come down in limos. They have their drivers, and their owners can't make it down to do their grooming or their training, so they send them with the driver, and it all works out.
And as a school there in Olde Town, Virginia, you guys have really had an opportunity to service a cross section of people, including some, high-powered folks in and around Washington, D.C. Now, Interestingly enough, I saw an article yesterday that I couldn't make big enough on my screen. I don't know what was going on, but it talked about the presidential dog, Bo, and it had you guys' names mentioned in it. What was that all about?
Well, I really like to go no comment on the president's dogs. We do have a very good grooming facility, and we are Portuguese water dog breeders. So we have helped them as far as getting a good grooming on their dogs on occasion. But we don't.
See, folks, we always tell you on the Rock Newman Show you find out information you never knew before. Now, Sandy says she likes to go no comment, but I'm going to interpret that no comment as Michelle and Malia and Barack. They might get over to the Olde Town School for Dogs ever so often. I mean, Sandy didn't. I'm not to start any rumors, but that's going to be my interpretation.
Well, I wish that was the case, but unfortunately it isn't.
So, Sandy, what got you into this field of work?
Oh, I'm a dog fan. I mean, I was bringing puppies home when I was 3 and 4 and 5 years old. Look what followed me home, Mom and Dad. So I've always loved dogs. I graduated from Hollins University with a BA in English.
Let's go back before you go to the university. So 3, 4, 5 years old, there's something about you that was just seriously attractive.
Totally. I looked at every breed book. I knew every breed of dog by the time I was 7 or 8. I was born loving dogs.
So you were born loving them.
I was a dog lover.
This has been a passion for a long time. So as a child, what's like share some experiences. I mean, you have a particular one that stands out?
Well, my first dog, obviously, your first dog always stands out.
Your first love.
That's right.
Yeah.
I brought the dog home, and he was a car chasing, dog fighting, tough cookie.
What kind of dog was he?
He was a pit cross, probably pit lab cross. I don't even know. Lived with us for 12 years. Died chasing a bus at 12 years of age.
Did he get hit by a car chasing a bus?
Yeah. And he was a real rogue. He would fight the Great Dane in the neighborhood, and maybe that's
Tough
what
guy.
Started me thinking about. Maybe I should learn how to train dogs if I'm going to have them.
Right. Fascinating. We will come back in just a moment after a few of these messages to talk to the dog expert extraordinaire, Sandy Mejais from the Olde Town School for Dogs in Olde Town, Alexandria, Virginia. We'll be right back on the Rock Newman Show, being broadcast from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets, 14th and D Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. Come on down and join us for great conversation and great breakfast.
My baby drives a bull handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year 100.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back, folks. Today's Saturday, November the 2nd, 2013. My guest in studio on the Rock Newman Show, Sandy Mejais. She is the co-owner of the Olde Town School for Dogs in Old Town, Alexandria, Virginia. That facility has been open since 1975. It has served over 20,000 dogs in its storied history. Sandy, let's come back to you. So you were telling us about your childhood dog that was a bit of a rogue. You were born loving dogs. You knew the names by the time of all dogs and all breeds by the time you were 6, 7 years old. Okay, so your dog got killed when it was about 12 years old chasing a bus. And talk to us about dog life sort of from there. What happened then?
Well, like everyone else, I went on, finished my education. Wasn't sure what I was going to do when I graduated from college.
Now, immediately after that dog passed, did you get another one right away? Were you traumatized and didn't want another one?
No,
How did you feel?
I had dogs all growing up, puppies that I bought at auctions for 25 cents that I would bring home, and or I had Irish Terriers growing up that my family helped me show, and I did a lot of showing with them even as a teenager.
Right.
But I ended up taking a little dog trainer's course when I graduated from college. It was a little 6-week course, and I told my parents, listen, I'm going to do this before I go out in the real world and do a real job.
Sure.
And I took this course with a Captain Arthur Haggerty, very famous dog man, really good dog man. And I started working for him after the course, and that was it. I never went back to the real world.
Now, somewhere in there, some people say, well, I don't mean to embarrass you. Well, we'll see here. Somewhere in that process, again, in my research, you took this dog training course and you met this handsome, debonair guy named Carlos.
The elusive Carlos.
The elusive Carlos, who I've yet to meet.
Right.
I've heard this voice, but I've yet to meet. So let me put you on the spot. Tell us how you met him.
He was one of the instructors in the dog training course that I took. He was working for Captain Haggerty.
Fresh teacher.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So that, and I ended up dating and both working at this kennel in upstate New York, and we sort of went our separate ways, and then got back together and opened a business prior to getting married. We decided that Washington, D.C. was a great location. New York City was flooded with dog trainers. My father was retired military, so we lived down here. I did. So we started looking around and found that little storefront, which is all it was when we first opened.
Right.
And opened the Olde Town School for Dogs. So
the place when you first opened, talk about progress. It was what, 300-400 square feet?
500, I think.
So 500 square feet, the size of a hotel room.
It had been a flower shop. It was small.
A little small place. And right now you guys have a little over, right around 7,000 square feet.
I'd say, yeah. It's down the basement.
Yeah. And look, this is not hardly an effort to give an endorsement, although I love what you do, but anything you want in terms of training, in terms of grooming or anything else, top of the line is Olde Town School for Dogs in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm talking from personal experience. I'm talking about where I take sort of now what is Dee Dee's Denai's absolute love. Okay, let's jump around on this. Okay, so Monty is obviously the apple of our eye. She's sucking up all the air in the room. And here's what has happened. She sees me as the plaything. I mean, I'm the one that roughhouses and all the rest. Dee Dee is more the disciplinarian. And as the disciplinarian, Monty obeys her more than she obeys me. She's like, yay, dude, Now, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to have her to obey me? And which brings to another question as I kind of learning this dog world. Does that mean to her Dee Dee is the pack leader?
No, I think you're still the pack leader. Dee Dee's the disciplinarian. I think Monty looks at you as her dad. I mean, her, like you said, her fun guy. I think if you ever really got annoyed with Monty and you told her to do something, she'd do it.
You know what? You know what's so similar? It's the same damn thing with my grandkids.
Exactly. Exactly.
And what I am finding out are the incredible similarities that exist because I guess what happens is a person's personality is what it is. And you interact and get kind of a reaction from people based on what your personality is. And there is a direct correlation between me and my grandchildren and how they treat me and how I treat them versus my wife. They all take her sort of more seriously and look to sit and stand and kick and punch on me. Now, there's much of the same thing with money. So in your history, do you find that to be consistent?
Yeah, and you're lucky you have Dee Dee. I know you probably know this.
Yes.
Because she,
in more ways than one.
Yeah, she runs a tight ship with Monty.
Yeah.
And that balances your very relaxed, Monty, you're so cute, behavior. If you were both that way, I think Monty would be a little bit of a hellion. Because there'd be nobody telling her to toe the line, and dogs need that. They need that structure. But the fact that you have Dee Dee there doing that, and then you're following through to some degree, is perfect. It's a perfect balance. So everything has gone great for you guys with your dog. I mean, it just all has worked. I don't see that all the time. Sometimes I'll see people that are both very relaxed and the dog is just running them over.
Yeah.
Or they're both too strict and the dog is like, oh my God, this is a hard life I'm living.
Right,
yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
So you're lucky. You have a nice balanced pack and it's working great.
Now, I have noticed, I'm referring here to sort of living my life on Facebook a little bit, because I posted the other day, I said, I was upstairs, I'd gone downstairs, and Monty has learned to run the steps, and so she runs down past me really, really fast. And so Dee Dee's at the bottom of the steps starting a lecture, and she's like, why are you rushing? Why are you running so fast? You don't have to be in a hurry like that. It's like you think your rent is due or something? You don't even pay rent. Money, you better get a job. So I'm upstairs hearing this conversation. Now, let me ask you, do you find it that typically men are more easygoing than the mama? Or do you weigh into that at all?
It varies. It truly varies. Sometimes the guys are much more strict with the dog, have a lot more expectations. Some guys get a dog because their wife pushes them into it or whatever, and don't have the love affair.
Yeah.
Then it's harder. Because everything the dog does is wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, the dog jumped. The dog, the dog chewed my loafer. Then it becomes a problem.
I was reading something last night about pit bulls, and again, for me being someone who was anti-dog for so long, not comfortable, really afraid of them. The pit bull was sort of at the top of the list in terms of where my phobia was. Do they deserve? They've got a sort of a bad rap on one hand, but their owners love them. Tell us about that breed.
Well, again, you have to look at what the dog was bred to do. Pit bulls were bred to fight. So they have a high prey drive, and they can be extremely aggressive. They can bite really, really hard. That said, there's so many of them that are so lovely. My son owns one, and I would let a child crawl on that dog's back, pull its tail, get in its face. Not that would be the correct thing to do, but I know the dog would never do anything. So they are much maligned, and it's for many of them, it's undeserved what people feel about them. That said, there are many out there that have been raised wrong, their genetics are bad, whatever it is, they're dangerous. And those dogs, but that's true with Rottweilers, Dobermans, Germans. It could be any breed. The pit bull's the most visible right now. But dogs that are poorly bred, poorly handled, can be dangerous. And that's what's happened to the pit bull.
I saw this huge dog in your place as a big black dog, just extraordinarily beautiful. Was that an Alaskan something?
That was a Newfoundland. Newfoundland. It's a water breed, big water rescue breed.
And tell us about that dog.
Well, they're really nice dogs. There's a lot of hair in the house when you have them.
Yeah.
They also do, some of them drool a bit. You have to like a big dog. You have to be comfortable with dog slobber, dog hair. But they're very lovely. They're nice with people. They were bred to save people from the water, basically. They're a water rescue dog, so most of them like to swim. And are nice in the house. They're big, but they're not super active.
I got a lot of feedback when I said you were going to be on and you were an expert. It's just, again, it's a whole new world I'm waking up to. Some of the questions were, in considering to get a puppy, sort of what are some of the basics? What food, exercise, rest. Kind of talk to us about, dog rearing 101.
Well, I think that the first thing that you have to do when you're getting a puppy is you have to think about, how am I going to confine this puppy when I can't supervise it? How am I going to get this puppy housebroken, especially if I work?
Right. Well, let's stop. How am I going to confine this puppy when I can't pay attention to it all the time? And so what are the ways? Well,
there's the crates, which are lovely. It's a den. The dogs get comfortable in their den. A lot of the puppies will scream initially, but they get over that. The crates can be a bad thing if they're misused. You shouldn't put a puppy in a crate for 8 hours and go to work. That's not okay. Sometimes a good rule of thumb is, you can put the puppy in the crate for as many hours as the puppy is months. So a 2-month-old puppy can do two hours in a crate. A 3-month-old puppy can do 3 hours in a crate. And to some degree you can do that, but no.
So 3 hours at one particular stretch.
Right. Other than overnight.
And is the crate where the puppy would sleep?
Yes, that's your best bet to get housebreaking done. And a lot of folks will put the crate into the bedroom so the dog has some interaction with them, even if it's not physical interaction. They're sleeping in the same room and they feel comfortable. They feel bonded with their owner.
Okay. So take us through then. So that was where you're going to have the puppy when you can't take it, and then the other aspects.
Then some folks can't, for whatever reason, they want a dog and they can't get home, or they don't want to use the crate. There's always baby gates, which can be used in bathrooms or kitchens. That when you do something like that, you have to think about possible destructiveness of your baseboards and things like that. But it is another alternative to using the crate. You should never shut a door on a dog. That makes them feel very claustrophobic. And so, some people say, well, I'll just close them in my laundry room, or I'll close them in the bathroom. Not a good idea. Dogs need to not feel closed in that manner, which is why the crates need to have some sort of a visibility to look out, or you use baby gates that they can look out from where they're confined.
So I mean, you said it, not in a bathroom area even, in terms of and closing a door.
Not when you close. No, don't. You wouldn't want to close the door on them. Yeah, you want to use gates. So if the dog's going to climb the gates, then you have to look at crates. But one of the biggest mistakes a lot of our clients make is taking the dogs out of the kennels too early, or not using a crate at all. And then they're saying, "Oh, the puppy's so good, and then you get over the honeymoon period, and the puppy's chewing the kitchen chairs, and the puppy's chewing everything around the house and having accidents.
Right. What does anything stand out in your experience in the 38 years that you've been over? That you've had Olde Town School for Dogs. Anything what surprised you more than anything else, or anything so shocking? I mean, I kind of want my listening audience to kind of be able to live the experience that you've had to a certain extent. Anything we talk about? What's the saddest case you ever had?
The first thing that pops into my head when you ask me that is there was an Afghan hound. This was back in the 70s.
Right.
His name was Hayata, and he was the nicest Afghan. And because they're usually they don't engage all that well a lot of the time. They're a bit aloof. They're kind of cat-like almost. But this dog engaged. He was just a lovely dog, and trained up beautifully. And about 6 months after we trained him, I got a picture of him in a letter from his owner that he had saved the entire family from a house fire, but that he had died in the house fire. And it still really breaks my heart when I think about that dog, because he was special. You could tell he was special, right from the get-go. And then to meet that kind of an end is hard.
Wow.
Yeah.
For individuals watching us, who want to get a dog and want to ultimately take him, I remember one thing I did as a kid, and I don't know whether this was because I just liked competition or what, but I used to watch the shows where the show dogs would go bouncing around or anything. So if somebody wants to get a dog, wants to turn it into a show dog, what do they do?
The best thing to do, first thing to do is go to this is something I love because I do show my Portuguese water dogs, but is go to a dog show. Go to a dog show and watch the competition. There's different things happening. There's the breed ring, which makes no sense to people, where the dogs kind of run around and they stand up, and there is some method to the madness of it, but most people don't understand what they're looking at. But they will get to see different breeds and how they look when they're moving, and talk to people who handle those breeds to see what they're like. That there's also the obedience ring, which is a lot of fun, where the dog does activities and exercises for the owner, and the judge scores them on how they behave.
So earlier you mentioned that people come and do one of the things that we did, that enroll their puppies, enroll their dogs into your program. And what's the first stage of your program that is designed for educating the puppies?
Our Puppy Head Start course, which is what we did with Monty, I love that course, because what we do is it's kind of relaxed, as you know.
Yeah.
We teach vocabulary, using food, so the puppy starts to learn, they're going to show me something to do, and it's happy. This is great. And we teach them to sit and lay down and come when called. And we don't expect them to do it in high distraction because they're babies.
Yeah.
But we do expect them to understand a few vocabulary words. And we did the Let's Go, where we teach Monty to walk. And Olde Town is beautiful for dog training. There's parks, there's Market Square and King Street, and lots of places to socialize your puppy. And while we're having that fun, we're trying to make sure the puppy gets housebroken and doesn't chew.
Well, these guys that you see sitting over there trained me when to go to break, and now's that time. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back, folks, to talk more about your pooch on the Rock Newman Show with dog expert extraordinaire Sandy Mejais.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back. My guest this hour, Sandy Mejais from the Olde Town School for Dogs in Alexandria, Virginia, talking about all things related to the canine world. I'm a recent recipient of a great gift, and that gift is a dog coming into mine and my wife's lives. One of the things that I think I can do now, Sandy, as a dog owner of a month with all that experience, is to say that it is a tremendous responsibility. And you said I was lucky to have Dee Dee. Thank God for Dee Dee, because she is so meticulous in terms of her care and her grooming and the love that she gives her on a very consistent basis. And I guess I'll, let you say it, but something that I have come to understand quickly is that it is a responsibility. At the end of the day, it's a responsibility that is providing tremendous pleasure and joy, but a responsibility nevertheless.
And I think that all of the rescues that we're seeing now indicate that a lot of people do not realize that when they breed their dogs and they have puppies, where are those puppies going to go? Are they going to have good homes?
Yeah.
Are they bringing these puppies into the world for something good or for a difficult life? Mm-hmm. And then there's other people that get puppies because they're so cute and it's impulsive and they don't take on the responsibility. And so it can work. It definitely works two ways. It's nice. We're lucky. We get to see mostly responsible dog owners, or they wouldn't be coming and enrolling their dogs in school.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you consider sort of the greatest misconceptions about dog ownership? And maybe ask another way, what is it that upsets you or frustrates you about people's reaction to dogs?
Well, I guess what bothers me the most is that most people, if they've ever petted a dog, touched a dog, owned one dog, they're a dog expert. Yeah. And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons dogs do things, and people don't always understand why that is. And sometimes it's good to seek the advice of an expert rather than just assume, well, I know why my dog is doing that. I've had a dog before. Mm-hmm. Because dogs are different, and all the different scenarios of what occurs with dogs can be very different.
Our nickname, we've already come up with 1,000 different nicknames for Monty. One of the ones I gave her the other day was Sniffer Licker. I mean, she wants to sniff everything and lick everything. When she's so preoccupied with sniffing, and I don't want to just talk about her, it's, indigenous to dogs to some extent. What's going on with all that sniffing?
Well, as we discussed in the lessons, Monty looks at the world through her nose. Their primary sense is their sense of scent, just as ours is our eyes. Uh-huh. We look at beautiful scenery, we're enamored with it. Dog smells beautiful scent, they're enamored with it. That's how they look at the world. Uh-huh. So, yes, a lot of times they get very hung up with the sniffing. And
like right along a wall or something like that where there doesn't seem to be anything to really sniff or anything, but they go there.
I'm not sure if I have my figures correct, but my old boss, Captain Haggerty, once told me that a dog can smell a grain of salt diluted 1 million times in water.
Really?
Or maybe it was 100,000, but it was something really big. It was like an astounding analogy to explain to me what dogs can smell. We just have no clue.
Okay, and so there's some sense that the body of research, whatever, that dogs emanate from the wolf, from wolves. But yet we have dogs like a Rottweiler, like a Saint Bernard, like that big Alaskan thing that was, nearly as tall as I was almost, and to the tiniest little things. How did that happen?
People they're pretty resilient when it comes to trying to breed what they want to make. And, you have the royalty in England, they wanted little dogs to sit in their laps. And, so they had to breed down. So they breed smaller and smaller and smaller. And you pick type and you breed to it. And people are still doing that, and trying. The latest craze is the doodle. Breed everything to the poodle and let's see what we get.
And it's called the doodle?
there's golden doodles, there's labradoodles, there's bernedoodles, there's let's breed to the poodle and see what we get. And that's a new kind of craze that a lot of people are doing. And and sometimes it's good. It's a good thing for the canine community when people try to breed something different, or if they're being careful and meticulous and doing the right thing. Sometimes it's a really bad thing. Because if you breed, let's say you breed a pug and a beagle together, and the pug has breathing issues and the beagle has a heart condition, and you don't check that stuff out, you get a short-faced dog with a bad heart. Yeah, that's a problem.
Okay, so at your school, you start off with Puppy Head Start. Again, what do you accomplish with that, and then what's the next step of education?
We try to make sure when they're done with puppy school that they know their vocabulary, that they're pretty much housebroken, provided the owner keeps them on a good schedule, that they can go out to dinner and not worry that the dog is going to bark, chew, cry, have an accident, things like that. At 6 months of age, they come to school. Our most popular program is called Day School. My husband and I worked in a boarding kennel where we did boarding training, and we said there's got to be a better way than this, where the dogs had to stay away from their home and they couldn't sleep in their own beds. And in the day school, the dogs come just like kids' school. They stay during the day, they go home in the evening.
If someone had had this conversation with me 3 months ago, I'd say you're out your damn mind. But let's go.
That's what everybody said to us when we opened the school. They said, you're going to have a school bus pick up the dogs? Ha ha. Everyone was laughing. They thought we were hilarious.
Oh, so wait a minute. Maybe I missed something. So you're saying you actually have a bus that goes to pick up?
No longer.
But
in the 70s I did. In the 70s we had a school bus. We went to Waldorf. We went to Vienna. We went anywhere we had to pick up our students and have them come to school. Now the things have changed. The dogs that come to school, many of them ride taxis because there's now dog taxi services. So. And limousine service. Exactly. Yeah. So now the dogs get a ride. I don't do the bus anymore. Right. And so they come to school, and what do they learn in that second phase? They learn how to heel, just to walk at your side without pulling. Sit when you stop, lay down, both from near you and from 15 feet away, come when called. Stays, both sit and down. We work on a 15-foot leash around lots of distractions. And then we give the owner lessons so that they can do all of these things. If they want to, they can go on and take a second course if the dog is suitable, where we do all of these things, but we do them off the leash. Now, so can you talk to us about, on the scale of intelligence, in terms of what dogs are thought to be? And I know we don't want to throw dirt on anybody's dog, but which breeds are thought to be more intelligent, highly intelligent, and then which ones are like not so intelligent? Well, there's a lot of questions as to intelligence versus trainability, because a lot of dogs won't let on to us how smart they really are. They don't want to learn. They don't want you to be able to teach them. So can you give me an example of that? Some of the hounds. Yeah. Some of the hounds, they don't care to work. They don't want to work. They would prefer that you not know that they are capable of working. So they might not be as easy to work with. So Elvis Presley might have known something when he ain't nothing but a hound dog. It's a question. But I have to tell you, I've trained, as I said, the Afghan hound I trained, Hayata, he was extremely smart. They are not known for their genius. So it depends, it varies from dog to dog. That said, trainability and intelligence, I think the Border Collie probably hits the top of the scale. Very hard dog sometimes to live with, because it's like having a genius in the house. Really? You have to keep them engaged, and you have to have things for them to do. Give them a computer. Exactly. They need stuff to do. Exactly. But very smart. And at the other end of the scale? Well, I don't want to offend anybody. I know, but some of the slower dogs, some of the dogs that have that are big and kind of lumbering. They're smart, but they're not as easy to train. Would be some of the big Mastiff type breeds or whatever. They learn, but it's very hard for them to get out there and heel and sit and lay down, because they just have that big body that they're. So there's phraseology, fighting like cats and dogs. Yeah. And certainly you see some of that, but more and more now with social media, Instagram, Facebook, and all the rest, you see these experiences where they coexist and get along very well. Cat and dog,
Talk to me about that.
You know, I have a lot of clients who have cats and dogs, and they get along just great. I think the trick is you got to kind of raise them together in order to really have a harmonious household right off the bat. Sometimes I'll get folks, I have to tell them they should not keep a dog that they've brought in, a rescue or whatever that they've brought in that's looks to be a danger to the cat. It really depends on what the dog's early conditioning is and how much prey drive the dog might have.
What do you find most rewarding about what you do?
Oh, I like to see the whole thing come together. Like with you and Dee Dee and Monty, I like that. I like to see the family happy, the dog fitting in, everything working. That I really like that. And I do some work occasionally, with people with disabilities and getting the dogs, doing something for them that makes a difference. Whether it's, somebody with a psychiatric issue or somebody with a physical issue. It's really nice when you see a dog really making a difference to a person.
I talked last night, the breeder that we got Monty from, she had another litter, and someone from Virginia Beach, Virginia, is thinking about getting a Havanese. And so they called me for a reference, and I talked to them, and they've been married 33 years. They had a dog. They got it when they had been married 10 years. The dog lived for 13 years, and then the dog passed away. And they haven't had one for 10 years, but now they're just like craving that experience once again. First of all, I told them all about you. They wanted to. They're obviously, looking at a Havanese. But they were really, really traumatized by the loss. And again, in that life of 60 years of being a non-dog person, when I heard of a dog being deceased or someone complaining or pining and like it was like a loss of a family member, I just used, yeah, right. But in talking to the lady last night, and feeling sort of the grief that she went through and the pain that she suffered, and now applying that to, thinking about Monty and just the unimaginable that if something happened to her, how do you deal with folks that have been your clients and, you've become sort of almost a part of their family along with the dog, and then they have to put the dog down?
Sadly, I have dealt with that a lot over the years because, the way the world works, they only live 10, 12 years. And, in many families, we're on fourth and fifth dogs with them, or because they've been coming to us since the early 70s. But, most people, and I tell them this, you can't replace a dog you've lost, but you can sure distract yourself. Because the grief is huge. There's this hole in your house, and I find that most of my clients tend to want to jump back on, unless they've got some kind of other issues of travel or whatever. They want to jump back in pretty quickly and get another dog.
Again, for those listening, in terms of how to inoculate your dog from various diseases and that sort of thing, there's a proliferation of deer that are around here. So what do you do for ticks? What do you do to guard against rabies? What do you do? And oh no, before you answer those, why is it such the antichrist of a dog is the kryptonite for a dog is chocolate?
You'd have to ask a veterinarian for sure, but there's something in there that is in pure chocolate that's extremely toxic. That said, I've known people whose dogs ate a whole bag of Oreos and you call poison control and they say, oh, there's nowhere near enough chocolate in that to hurt your dog. So, you sure don't want your dog getting into chocolate, but if they do, don't panic.
Oh, my God. We had a Hershey bar the other day, and, you pop that little silver piece off the Hershey bar with almonds, and always a little tiny piece of chocolate falls. And Dee Dee and I both were on our hands and knees, like trying to get it up. But, you don't want them to have any, but that wouldn't have necessarily been the case.
You always want to check. You can check with there is poison control that'll tell you, how much chocolate they think the dog ingested. I had a dog eat 4 chocolate brownies the other day. someone called me, and we found out where they were made, and we called, and they said there's not enough chocolate in those things to do anything to your dog.
So again, rabies, the issue with hearts. There's something that happens where their heart gets enlarged or something like that. And there's a new virus or something that was out in the Midwest.
Well, there's a canine flu that we've been hearing a lot about, and that people have been getting their dogs vaccinated for. But I'm knocking on some wood, but I've not seen a case of it or known a dog who's had the canine flu. What we do at the school is we insist that all the dogs have the vaccinations that they're required to be current for whatever.
And what are those vaccinations?
They all need rabies, distemper, hepatitis, leptospirosis. I think is one that you can kind of choose and pick, because some dogs have reactions to that shot, so they have to be careful how they do it. But you definitely want distemper, parvo, rabies. Those Bordetella, is not a required shot, but it helps with controlling kennel cough.
Yeah. Dogs' teeth. Is there any such thing as dogs losing their teeth and then getting false teeth or anything? Or?
Well, there is canine dentists, and they do crowns, and they do, they can fix bites. They do braces, and and that's not just for aesthetics. That's some dogs can't close their mouth correctly for whatever reason, and they can't chew, or they lose a canine or whatever. So the dentists are out there, and the vets like to do dentals on dogs. It's really much better for them to have their teeth done by a veterinarian a couple times over the course of their life.
So as we wrap this up, and folks out there looking, they're scared like Dee Dee and I were, what do you say as we wrap this up here in terms of whether or not folks should get that puppy and make it a part of their lives?
I think you have to go with your heart and see what your heart says, and then you have to go with your sensibilities and say, oh, geez, I'm gone 12 hours a day, but I would love a puppy. Don't do it.
That's not a good idea.
Don't do it. No. It's just not fair to the dog.
Yeah. Monty, this hour's been dedicated to you, Sandy, and your mommy, and I love you. Okay. Thanks, folks. We're coming back with the chairman of the Washington, D.C. City Council, Phil Mendelson, right after these messages.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back. November the 2nd, 2013. We're broadcasting live from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets, 14th and V Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. I like to say that. I like to say that I'm in the Langston Hughes Room. I'm happy to be where I am, happy to be doing this broadcast from this location. It is a facility that welcomes all. This particular facility, frankly speaking, this restaurant embraces all from every spectrum of life and welcomes you. And you certainly are welcome to come down and to join the show. Get some great breakfast here on a Saturday morning and any other morning, all day long. The service, the food, and everything else is just great. The atmosphere, the climate, the fact that they promote, Busboys and Poets promotes that there is one tribe, there's one world, that we're all trying to work towards making the world a little better place to live. My guest in this second hour is the chairman of the D.C. City Council, Phil Mendelson. Phil, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you got a lot of stuff going on today, but thanks for dropping by.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. Phil, let's just jump right in here. We have a mayoral race.
Yes.
Coming up in 2014, and on live television, things happen. We just had something happen back there, but we're going to keep on going.
I'm not looking.
We have a race coming up.
Yes.
And there is a question as to whether or not the current mayor, conventional wisdom says that the current mayor, while he has been in office, Mayor Gray, has done quite a good job, that the city has moved ahead, that there's been a lot of progress, that on his watch, given, I'm saying conventional wisdom, given the job that he's done, he would deserve a second term. There is a big question about whether or not he's going to run. You, who work so closely with the mayor as the chairperson of the city council, what is your opinion about whether or not Mayor Gray should run or not run?
Well, I can only guess what he's going to do, and we're going to find out in a week, because the petitioning, which every candidate has to do to get on the ballot, begins next Friday, November 8th. My guess is that he's going to run, because he's been acting like he's going to run, and he does have a record that he can point to. I think about where we are economically.
Yeah.
The city is so much better off today than it was just a couple of years ago. Financially, we were able to weather the federal shutdown, which we never could have done before because we've built up the reserves. Just as for example, we've begun to get out of a number of the receiverships, the court receiverships, which when Mayor Fenty was the mayor, he talked about trying to do. When Tony Williams was the mayor, he talked about trying to do. We've actually gotten out of some of them. We've reduced some of the costs with special education. These are just examples. In the area of criminal justice, the city is doing much better. I know that area particularly well because I chaired the council's judiciary committee.
So how are we doing much better in the criminal justice? I mean, we're going to go back to some of the other things you said, but just on that particular point.
Well, the long-term trend has been a substantial decline in homicides, robberies, and other violent crimes. And in fact, the long-term trend, and when I say long-term, I'm talking about if you look back the last 5-6 years, we've seen the number of violent crimes in which a gun has been used to go down even greater than the reduction in violent crime. People are very pleased with Kathy Lanier. We just opened a year ago a consolidated forensic lab, which is state-of-the-art in terms of forensic evidence. Nobody can do as well as CSI does on TV, but we have a state-of-the-art lab that's doing, is competing with CSI. These are all positive steps in terms of public safety. The lab, was an initiative that began under Tony Williams. It's hard to believe how long it's taken to get it open. The police 2 months ago dedicated the Tactical Village, which surrounding law enforcement agencies want to use. This is for training for all kinds of, like a not mass casualty, but an active shooter incident, for example. And just in different ways. We've improve public safety in this city.
You know, I've had guests on. Kathy Lanier has
Yes.
been on, and certainly she cuts an imposing and impressive figure.
Yes.
I think that, you know, you look around the country and you look at police chiefs, and Kathy Lanier has to be thought of as to be one of the best in the country. Talk to her a little bit about this, and I also talked to someone from the lawyers group that have talked about the disproportionate number of arrests of those in the African American community. This city now is less than 50% African American, and it was staggering numbers, for example, of those arrested on a misdemeanor sort of drug charges were African American. What is happening with that? Why is that, and how do we correct that?
Well, it is a concern, and it's a concern on the misdemeanor side, not the felony side. I mean, there are no charges that I know of that the police are policing disproportionately African Americans or people of color with regard to robberies or murders. I don't hear that complaint. But I do hear it with regard to the misdemeanors, and particularly the drug offenses. I think part of the issue is we need to look at whether some of those should be offenses. For instance, marijuana, and you know, marijuana is, there are a couple of bills pending in the council, one of which would decriminalize it.
Are you supporting decriminalization?
Yes. My only hesitation is, and I do have some hesitation, is that we have to be mindful that as the nation's capital, an issue like that in which Congress has intervened in the past, that we don't want to go too far and have Congress step in. Now, that's not a reason to abandon the policy. It's just a matter of a reason for coming up with the right strategy to get it into effect. But, you know, the effective treatment of substance abuse is not putting somebody in jail. It just isn't.
Yes.
And yet that's what we do with these misdemeanors, is that they're all criminal offenses in which there's jail time associated. And we've seen across the country an increasing number of jurisdictions that look at marijuana and say, this is not an offense that should be arrestable.
Right. Let's go back. Man, there was quite the controversy roughly 3 weeks, month or so ago about the living wage bill in Washington, D.C. The mayor vetoed what he was sent by the council. Where did you stand on that?
Oh, well, I had authored the legislation, and I was solidly behind the legislation, and I was disappointed in the mayor's veto, and I was disappointed that we went from 8 votes, which was one short of being able to override the veto, to 7 votes, with one council member changing her vote. But you know, one looks for a silver lining, and I sort of hate it when people talk this way, but the reality is that a majority of the council has said that they want to see an increase in the minimum wage. A number of those who oppose the living wage bill, have said they support a minimum wage, and I think we are on the brink of passing an increase, a substantial increase in the minimum wage.
Substantial increase, what's that going to look like?
Well, $11.50 in a couple of years. Right now, the minimum wage in the district is $8.25, and there's no jurisdiction in the country that's at $11.50 right now. We would get there over 3 years. Right now, San Francisco is at $10.55. Santa Fe is at $10.50, if I remember correctly. We would go to $10.25 in 2015. And then in 2016 go to $11.50. And that falls short of what the living wage is calculated to be to survive in a district. But it would be a substantial increase. I'm told that we have the highest cost of living of any city in the country. And therefore, I think we should embrace that our minimum wage needs to go up, and there's nothing wrong with it being the highest in the country, although it wouldn't be that much higher than other jurisdictions.
You know what? It is, that seems so practical.
Yeah.
Politicians don't necessarily have a great reputation for doing what is practical. So you're going to push hard for that.
Yes, and I think the votes are there.
How does the business community feel about that?
Well, the business community, what they have said is that they support an increase in the minimum wage, and I think that's also a byproduct of the living wage, the Large Retailer Accountability Act fight, that, their argument against that bill, which people saw as the Walmart bill, but it was more than Walmart. Their argument against it was, you shouldn't just focus on a couple of businesses, you should do something broad. Well, we're doing something broad. The business community has said they support an increase in the minimum wage. they say reasonable. What does reasonable mean to them? Well, they know that we're looking at 1150, and while I can't say that they've embraced that, the opposition to it is I've not sensed as being significant.
Not as sharp.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where they're really upset is over a proposal to increase what's called the tipped minimum wage for tipped workers, and that gets very complicated.
Yeah.
But
so let me ask you, the mayor vetoed the bill.
Yes.
Which seems to have opened the door for Walmart to come into the city.
Yes.
With its major developments, opening up its mega stores and creating a lot of jobs.
Yes, 4 or 5 stores.
Okay. Now, that's good or bad for Washington, D.C.?
Well, you know, to me, the reason why I'm hesitating is opening stores is good. That kind of economic activity is good. On the other hand, we need decent jobs, not just jobs, and that's what gets lost in this. People are excited about another business that opens up with paying minimum wage jobs. You can't live in the District of Columbia on $8.25 an hour. You can't. Mm-hmm. And the living wage, according to MIT, and anybody can go on MIT.edu, and you can look up Washington, D.C., the living wage for a single person is $13.68 an hour. At $8.25, we're not close. And I'm not even sure $13.68 is good enough. Certainly if you have a child, a single adult with a child, you need more than $13.68. In fact, I think the living wage there is over $20 an hour. So, you know, opening stores with jobs that are minimum wage sounds good, creating more jobs, but these are jobs people can't live on.
That's a very tough issue, huh?
Correct.
Because I mean, it's not just the long term is a Walmart coming in and having jobs. They're making gazillions of dollars of profit, and people who are working for them don't have a living wage. That's one thing.
Yes.
The other side is, in order to build a Walmart, you got a whole bunch of construction jobs that's going on. You know, you are spurring the argument from that other side was, for example, Skyland.
Yeah.
You know, if Walmart anchors that project and you have a whole development over there, and if they don't, it may sit in blight as it has for another 20 years. It's not an easy issue to grapple with.
Oh, absolutely, it's not an easy answer, but I think that the answer is a long-term strategy, a vision, and the vision is quality jobs in the district. So I don't think the best economic strategy for Washington, D.C. is to pursue minimum wage jobs. It's to pursue economic growth that pays better wages than minimum wage. Mm-hmm. Or to put it more simply, I would not have as the key to my economic development strategy attracting Walmart stores. I would have as the key attracting higher end, I shouldn't say higher end stores, but better paying jobs. For instance, in the tech sector or in the healthcare industry. And I'm not talking about I'm not talking about doctors, I'm talking about technicians, for example, people who get paid more than minimum wage.
You said something early on. You said that your guess, you certainly didn't bet the house, but you said your guess is that Mayor Gray will run for a second term. You are an astute politician.
Well, okay.
That some people might find that debatable, but you know, you're kind of the quiet man that keeps on winning. Yeah. That's your feeling that he's going to run. Why do you feel that way?
I've worked with Vince since he was first elected to the council in 2004. I used to sit next to him before he became chairman of the council. We've always had a good working relationship, and I think, just as I know him, that what I see is a person who's going to run, not a person who's looking to close out his term and his being mayor. Mm-hmm. But it's a guess.
Yeah, and again, track record in office seems to say that it would deserve 4 more years. There is a climate, an unfortunate climate, a cloud that I think hangs over D.C. politics.
Unquestionably.
Former chairman convicted of wrongdoing while in office. Harry Thomas convicted. Michael Brown, I think, has pled guilty. Other folks having taken money from the businessman who is at the center of the investigation into the mayor's previous campaign. So, you know, this particular program is about exporting the incredibly wonderful culture and all the good and great things about Washington, D.C. to the rest of the world. We have an agenda. You know, I don't come here pretending that we don't. We do. We have an agenda. We want to expose the rest of the world to Washington, D.C. We consume here as live streaming viewers, as radio listeners, as TV viewers. We consume products really that comes from everywhere else in the world. This is about sending out Washington, D.C. to the rest of the world. But we've got to be real, and that there is that cloud. So in that cloud, you've got Muriel Bowser that is running. You've got Jack Evans that is running. You've got Tommy Wells that is running, who are all members of the D.C. Council, which you chair. Why didn't you run?
Why don't I run?
I said, why didn't you?
Why didn't I?
Why did you choose not to run?
Well, I enjoy very much the legislative process, and I think there's a skill to being successful in the legislative process. I became chairman a year ago, and I enjoy being the chairman, and I think that my skills as chairman will grow, and so I'm content where I am.
So would that mean you have no aspirations to be mayor at any point?
In politics, one never says no. But I am, next Friday, November 8th, going to take out petitions to run for re-election as chairman of the council.
Okay. I want to deal with that from a timing point of view about the mayor and when he needs to pick up his petitions, that sort of thing. When we come back, take a break, come back with D.C. City Council Chairperson Phil Mendelson, the quiet, effective man.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back. Today, November the 2nd, Saturday, 2013. My guest in studio at Busboys and Ports in the Langston newsroom, City Council D.C. Chairman, D.C. City Council Chairman Phil Mendelson. Phil, I'd like for you to give us a little education on a couple of things.
Sure.
When we went to break, you were talking about the time that you think we're going to have a decision by the mayor in a week or so. Now, you mentioned the date of November the 8th. I remember reading in the newspaper from the Washington Post, Mike DeBonis's article, where he talked about for certain that the mayor would make a decision by then. It sounded as if anybody running for office had to do something by the 8th. Is that the case?
Pretty much. I mean, it's not a hard and fast deadline. But the reality is that in order to run for office, citywide office, in a party primary, like the mayor running for in the Democratic primary,
yes,
he has to get 2,000 signatures, and to be safe, you always get at least twice that number. So 4,000 signatures between November 8th and January 2nd. It's a horrible time to be collecting signatures because of Thanksgiving and the December holidays, and so there's less time than in previous years. A candidate.
So that's not a hard and fast rule, but it makes a whole lot of sense to get them sooner than later.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't get my 2,000 signatures in the month of November, I'm going to be knocking on your door on Christmas Eve. I don't know if you're going to answer the door when you're sitting down for Christmas dinner, and I'm there saying, will you sign my petition? So I got to do those signatures in November. If I don't start on November 8th, then I'm just making life more difficult. That's why I think November 8th is when we're going to see candidates coming forward.
That's very interesting. On November the 9th, sitting at this very table, Vince Gray will be my guest.
Okay.
So that's some pretty good timing for us here.
Yes, and if he hasn't taken out the petitions on Friday, I ask him why. He just can't wait. So he'll have to do it Monday, if not Friday, but he just can't wait.
Okay.
That's true for all of us.
What's your thought as a studied politician as to you think he's going to run knowing him? So many people are weighing, just recently, once again, the Washington Post has been pretty relentless about the mayor.
Yeah.
Speaking out about the previous campaign, what he knew, when he knew it, and that sort of thing. For the most part, on advice of counsel, the mayor said, I'm not answering those questions. With that how do you figure, as a politician, that affects his campaign?
There's no question it does affect the campaign, and it's a horrible situation to be in. On the one hand, he has to deal with what's going on with the U.S. Attorney's investigation, and he certainly doesn't want to say something that is inaccurate, that invites more investigation that's inaccurate, or whatever. He's got to be very careful in that regard, because there's a U.S. attorney involved. And on the other hand, in politics, the public has a right to know what happened and to demand to know what happens. So one has to be quiet and one has to be verbose. And how you reconcile the two is a horrible dilemma. And voters have a right to understand what happened in 2010. And clearly, there was wrongdoing that happened, because we've seen a number of people who've already pled guilty with regard to the 2010 mayoral campaign. So it's a very difficult situation. I don't know how he's going to reconcile those two needs, but he's going to have to.
I want to ask you about your governing style and your campaigning style.
Sure.
One of your opponents in the last race for city council would go to, according to him, he would go and knock on doors, and he would hold up your picture.
Yes.
And he would say, do you know who this man is?
And they said no.
And they said no.
Yes.
And you won by a landslide.
Yes.
Tell me about that magic.
Well, this is a challenge with regard to democracy. in this country, and that is the voters don't participate as much as they need to. The reality is that most of the people on the city council, maybe even all of them, have less than 50% recognition by the voters. I remember in 1998, and my numbers are off a little, that there was posted a survey very early in the mayoral election in 1998. That's the first election Tony Williams won, and what was the voter identification of these different candidates? And I think it was like in the teens. It might have been a little higher than that. Voters don't know. When you ask, do you know who this person is? They don't know. And that means that they're not paying attention. Yeah. They don't know where we are on the issues. People do begin to focus the closer you get to the election, and I've always been very aggressive as a candidate, getting around the entire city, making myself known, and I do that not just during the election, so that when I'm out, so that in an election, when I see some folks, they don't say, well, this is the only time I've seen you. No, I'm out all the time, and I'm not, I don't have to be defensive when somebody says they haven't seen me. So that's my style, to be aggressive, getting around to voters. And I recognize that voters don't focus on an election until the last couple of weeks. I mean, we're seeing that right now in Virginia, where with the governor's race, people are now beginning to focus the last couple of weeks on that race and making decisions. It's unfortunate because in a democracy, you want people paying attention the entire time, not just the last couple of weeks before the election.
And in a democracy and during elections, you want an educated electorate.
Yes.
Washington, D.C. has gotten hit pretty hard about its educational, the education that it provides its young kids.
Yes.
How are we going to make that better?
It is getting better, and it's getting better at a glacial speed. I'd like to see it get better a lot faster, because the kids who are graduating from our schools who are not proficient in English and in math, we're losing them, and they're losing all the opportunities that they should have in life. So I'm anxious that we move quicker.
How are we going to move quicker?
Well, there are a number of strategies that are being pursued, and implicit in my saying this is that I do support Chancellor Henderson, although I think the oversight that the council is giving is good because it keeps pushing her. Mm-hmm. She's focusing on improving reading in the middle school, because what we've seen is that there are a large number of kids who begin to drop out, 9th grade, 10th grade, and so she's, to counteract that, she's now pushing literacy academies in the 9th grade. I've actually been pushing her to do it in the 8th grade. David Catania has legislation that would end social promotion. Right now, a kid can be held back in the 8th grade, I think in the 6th grade, but that's it. And I agree, a kid should not be advanced from one grade to the next if he or she is not at grade level.
They're proficient in that
yes.
grade. And what has been the justification
for
moving a kid that's not proficient?
I don't know. I mean, there are disadvantages to a kid that's held back. We all remember when we were in school, the kid who was repeating usually was not the kid that we all looked up to. Yeah. And we don't want to be stigmatizing kids, but the challenge is on the school and the teacher to get that kid ready. Now, that's another issue, is that there are some kids, particularly kids who are coming from impoverished families, who have a lot of challenges that they bring into school. Transportation being one. And so we need to provide the resources, the additional resources to help those kids. And then sometimes I think that's an unfair burden on the public schools. I shouldn't emphasize public, but on the schools. I want a teacher who's teaching math or teaching reading, not a teacher who has to deal with all of the social problems that a kid might have. But we do have to, as a government, address the collateral problems that are holding kids back. And that's an initiative I've been pushing, truancy reduction, looking at kids who are truant as self-identifying that there are issues in their lives that are a reason why they are truant. Find out what those issues are and address them. It might be mental health, it could be transportation, it might be a single mom who is having difficulty getting the kid to school and getting to work and holding her job, addressing these problems so that the kid has one focus, and that is getting to school and wanting to be in school and learning.
Is education the number one problem in the District of Columbia right now?
Yes, which is not to say that it's exclusive to others, but yes, I think education is, for a variety of reasons. One is that first and foremost, we shouldn't be losing kids. And when I say losing kids, I mean kids who are dropping out, kids who don't have all the opportunities that they should have when they graduate, if they graduate. So it's number one for that reason. It's number one because the city is less attractive for people to stay in or move to if our public education system isn't good.
As someone who loves Washington, D.C. and identifies very closely, I'm angry that we're not further along the path towards statehood.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I think I support statehood, and I'm just so frustrated with Congress. They won't give us more authority, yet at the same time they're not interested in us. They seem to be only interested in D.C. when it's rider time, meaning time to put riders on something, and use us for their social arguments and national debates. And we need statehood. I admire the efforts over the last several years, council members, the mayor who've gone out, ramped it up in terms of civil disobedience to try to bring more attention to the issue. I do think that the federal government shutdown helped us in bringing attention nationally to the fact that, why are we being treated like a federal agency? Our dollars are not federal dollars, they're local dollars, and that's not understood. It's just not understood. The mayor told a story. Remember that press conference he crashed?
Yeah,
and
Harry Reid.
He talked to a senator, not Harry Reid, but a different senator at that or after that press conference, who spoke of the district as if our dollars were federal dollars, or like some of our local dollars we could still spend. Clearly not understanding our situation. We cannot spend local dollars until Congress says yes. It's ridiculous. You pay your sales tax. I can't spend it until Congress says yes. That's not true anywhere else. And but the challenge here...
There's such an irony. It is such an irony. We're supposed to be the seat of democracy.
Yes.
That is a beacon light for the rest of the world.
We're the only nation's capital where the citizens don't have a vote in the national legislature.
That's an embarrassment.
Yes.
And that's an absolute indictment on Congress and on democracy.
Yes. And we've tried legal solutions going to the courts. And I'm not saying we shouldn't continue to try that, but the courts have made it clear up to this point that it's a political solution. And the political solution involves Congress. And until we somehow raise awareness outside of the District of Columbia and get pressure on these federal lawmakers from Utah and Wyoming and Montana and everywhere else, it's going to be a struggle.
At the beginning of the Obama administration, you had a Democratic president, you had a Democratic Congress,
yes,
and you had a Democratic Senate.
Yes,
why in the hell wasn't more done then?
Wasted opportunity. I don't think we appreciated how tenuous that moment was, and we did not push. I don't think we pushed hard enough, and I don't want to be too critical because it's always clear in hindsight. I remember, though, that where we ended up with the voting rights, which was not statehood, but the voting rights bill, which was to give us a vote in the House, we allowed it to get attached to a gun rider.
Let me ask you a question. Has Barack Obama proved to be in any way any better for Washington, D.C. than George Bush was?
This would be my answer. I like Barack Obama. George Clinton, Bill Clinton.
George Clinton.
But he was never in the White House.
and Bootsy and them.
Bill Clinton. One I have to have always.
George Clinton was just here, by the way.
Oh, good.
At the D.C. Chamber of Commerce.
Yes. Maybe something else can fall off the wall here. Bill Clinton was much better. He was. And, but, that's just the challenge we've got. To get to...
Oh, I'm coming back to that. Bill Clinton was much better.
Yes.
But in effect, I mean, and this is something that, not necessarily I've thought about this so much before, but I'm just thinking about it right now in real terms, because we keep it real on the Rock Newman Show.
Yeah.
The reality is, you as the chairperson of the D.C. City Council, as a longtime political person, really can't say that Barack Obama, in your measure of things, has been any better for Washington, D.C. than George Bush was.
Well, we've made this progress. We got the license plates put back on the presidential limousine.
Hallelujah. Yeah.
You read my tone. Yes.
Yeah. And, for a president who received in the 90 percentile of the district's votes, that's a sad commentary.
But it also speaks to the challenge, and there's not an easy answer to it. But unfortunately, we're dependent on the national figures, members of Congress, the President of the United States, and we've got a friend in the White House, and he put budget autonomy in the Budget Request Act in our appropriation bill, which has not passed. But we don't. We have locally passed budget autonomy, and as far as I'm concerned, it is the law. When I go to the mayor and to the chief financial officer and say, "Okay, start writing the checks. We got budget autonomy," they won't do it.
Some people who I don't necessarily look so favorable upon, they said taxation without representation is tyranny. Always was and always will be. Taxation without representation right now is tyranny.
Yes.
I'd like to know if ever there is the discussion about a coordinated effort of greater civil disobedience. The courts are not giving any redress. The courts are not giving redress. The political process is not redress. Civil disobedience, should it be ratcheted up?
I think so. But that's easier said than done. And we saw it in the discussion, the discussion among elected officials during the government shutdown. Should we ratchet up the civil disobedience? And there are always reasons not to do it, and arguments, and maybe this will get us in trouble and so forth. I'm reminded of, in civil rights, the Birmingham, the children marching in Birmingham in 1962. And most people don't really look at that history. It was unbelievably controversial. And was it going to backfire? To get kids involved, getting kids arrested? I mean, what would that make Martin Luther King and SCLC look like, that they were getting kids involved? And yet it turned out to be a brilliant strategy. I mean, it just changed. It was a significant moment in civil rights. That's always a challenge. One of the challenges with civil disobedience is, will it work or will it backfire? But I do think that we need to step that up. And the reason why is because it is a way that we can get more national attention. Part of the challenge with civil disobedience is that we have a demonstration and 50 people show up, 100 people show up, 600,000 people should show up.
Yeah.
And how we get there, it's got to be thought through. And civil disobedience is never just on the cuff. It's got to be thought through.
Phil Mendelson, you're invited back.
Rock,
Thanks a lot for coming on the Rock Newman Show. Folks, we'll be right back after these brief messages.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, thank you for tuning in. Welcome back. Today, November the 2nd, 2013. This is the Rock Newman Show. We're broadcasting live from Langston Hughes' room at Busboys and Poets. And our guest in this segment is Pamela Pinnock. She is the Vice President of Marketing and Special Events for Busboys and Poets. And she has been conducting a monthly series called Actor. We want to talk about that. We also want to, before we get into your specific program that you've been hosting that has become a real favorite around these parts, before we get into talking about that, talk to us about your position as Vice President of Marketing and Events at Busboys and Poets, and talk to us about the mission of Busboys and Poets.
Okay. Well, our mission we call a tribal statement, and it has to do with being a place that welcomes all people.
Yeah.
Just in regular language, it's a place where we invite all people to come in and be welcomed here, diverse backgrounds and cultures. We say we are a place that honors diversity, that is a place where you can come in and feed your mind, body, and soul, a place where art and politics intentionally collide. And we try to honor that in what we do.
And folks, as I sit here at this table broadcasting from the Langston Hughes room at Busboys and Poets, what Pam just talked about is the mission that you'll see on the menu. It's sort of the philosophy of this particular place. I have become a huge fan of this place, not because I broadcast from here, but because the mission statement is lived out in these quarters every single day. I invite, urge, and encourage you all to come down to be a part of what is this wonderful experience called Busboys and Poets. Pam, the Actor series, let's talk about that, because that's become a popular series. And folks, if you don't know about it, listen up. Tell your friends to listen up also.
Okay, the acronym ACTOR stands for a Continuing Talk on Race. Mm-hmm. And just a little bit of history about the series. We started the series because when Busboys and Poets opened in 2005, here in this location, the historic area, the U Street corridor, we had a lot of folks come in and ask if the place was black-owned.
Yeah.
The name Busboys and Poets, as you know,
sure,
were named in honor of Langston Hughes, who was known as the busboy poet in the early part of his career. Right. So the patrons who would come in couldn't wrap their minds around the fact that a place would be named after a black man if it wasn't owned by anyone other than a black man. Mm-hmm. And as you know, Andy Shalal, the owner of Busboys and Poets, is Iraqi-born,
yes,
but clearly understands the racial dynamic in the U.S.
Yeah.
and wanted to honor this particular neighborhood. And we're in a building called the Langston Lofts and wanted to name his place after Busboys and Poets. So, the Actor series, a continuing talk on race.
Just before you go there, I have a commentary.
Okay.
That commentary is, you said Andy Shalal is Iraqi-born. Mm-hmm. And you said that, obviously correctly, that Busboys and Poets is named after a black man. And people couldn't quite wrap their head around the fact that a place would be named after a black man but wasn't black owned.
Right.
And here's my commentary. I've gotten to know Andy Shalal, and I have been involved in some very progressive causes. I've known some what would be considered to be strong black men who are militant and beyond. And whether that's Stokely Carmichael or H. Rap Brown or many of those in the black power movement.
Okay.
I've grown to know those people, admire and respect those people, and to love those people. and I'm going to say this, in terms of their ideals and what they represent, in terms of equality for all, I don't know a person that's more of a black man than Andy Shalom. That's how I feel about Andy Shalom. Okay, now tell us about the active series.
Again, people would come in when we opened in 2005 and they want to know who's the owner, who's the owner. So in just internal conversations, we were talking about how do we address this with our audience? And so Andy and I were talking one day about maybe we should have it on the frequently asked questions on the website. We'll just put down, well, the owner is Andy Shalal. And as we talked about it more, we thought, this is an opportunity for us. We have a business that has drawn all kinds of people, every walk of life, a diverse audience. This is an opportunity for us to have a conversation about race in this space.
Yes.
We're not the Academy. We're a community restaurant, and we want to invite people in to have these conversations. And so a continuing talk on race was born, the Actor event. We've been holding this discussion series since February 2006. We have become one of the longest running community discussions on race in the country. There are no right or wrong answers. What we say to people is everybody comes in here and gets treated with dignity and respect. Right. You don't get your opinion laughed at. You come in and you get to speak your truth about race. Sometimes it's an author event. Sometimes it's small group discussions. Sometimes we show a film. It's the first Sunday of every month from 5 to 7 right here in the Langston Room.
Which means tomorrow.
Which means it's tomorrow.
Yes.
And tomorrow we will be talking about black women and identity. And the program is called Black Women, Guardians of Culture. So we will be having that conversation. We have an author joining us, and we have another subject matter expert joining us tomorrow. And I hope that folks listening today will come and join us for part of that discussion. Each month when we have this discussion, we invite the audience to be part of the talk. So it's not just a lecture series. It's where people are in community, and we're set up as a restaurant style here in the Langston Room. So we invite people to have discussions at their tables. We put a question on the table each month, and so folks talk about that among themselves and are able to share their truth about race, culture, and class.
It is my feeling that in order for America to realize what was supposed to be what was written, there's a lot of hypocrisy by hypocrites who wrote a lot about early American history and what America was and what it was to be. But that in order for it to be its greatest self, it must deal much more candidly and forthrightly with the issue of race. Yet and still in 2013, by and large, race is an uncomfortable subject for most people to talk about.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think a lot of that has to do with kind of this whole blame and shame thing. When you talk to white people, they say, oh, well, black people talk about race too much. You talk to black people say, well, white people don't talk about race enough. They don't talk about it at all. And I think what happens is that the conversation, because it's often uncomfortable, because there's often not a shared point of view, that people just don't talk about it at all. And what we believe here at Busboys and Poets is that the only way that we will advance this nation toward one of racial justice is to begin having those conversations. People have to talk. You have to talk about it. You have to be able to see someone else's point of view. And more importantly, you have to be able to talk to people in a way that they can hear you.
I'll use a boxing analogy. If you think about this for a second to try to help, illuminate your point. That if you've got a fighter in one corner and you got a fighter in another corner, they're brought together by the referee, and one of the famous referees says, let's get it on. And they fight. you know, they engage. But in this issue of race, you know, you got, let's call it white and black. You got white in one corner and black in another corner, and they come to the center of the ring, and it's like, let's get it on, but they end up both going back towards their corners because they never, there's, like you say, there is that varying point of opinion, and like rarely do they mesh, and there's the candid, honest conversation. You go back to the preconceived notions that you came in the ring with, and that keeps you in your corner. The most segregated hour in this country is on Sunday morning.
Right.
The worship hour. And we're all supposed to be worshiping one deity.
Right. Right.
But we're so separated even there.
Yeah, I think that it goes a little bit beyond really kind of the differing opinions. I think what it speaks to is the differing experiences.
Yeah.
You know, when you meet people that their only experience with people of color is what they see on television, they don't know anyone.
Culture.
They don't understand the culture. They don't engage or interact in a real way with people of color. They don't have an experience. They don't have anything to relate to people of color, whereas very often people of color in this nation are forced to deal with a majority culture in white people.
Sure.
You know, forced to deal with white people make the rules. White people are, you know, the majority of legislators in our government. They hold power in employment. So people of color are forced to deal with and understand that white culture, but white people very often don't have any. Right, they can ignore other cultures and get by just fine. And so when you don't have that shared language, when you don't have that shared experience, and you're not talking, you know, there's no wonder we continue to have the problems that we have.
You know, just kind of off the top, it makes me think about the argument of affirmative action. Now, somewhere in the mid to late 60s, as in I'm talking about 1860, I'm talking about 1960, 1970, there's an effort through the civil rights movement and some legislation to start to talk about the redress of a nearly 400 year of injustice.
Right.
So for 400 years, affirmative action was practiced. In reality, the affirmative action of those that obtained their status in society, their wealth, their institutions, their powerful place in government through the legalized subjugation of black people.
Right.
And so you got a 400-year head start. Now you have those people who sit on Capitol Hill and in other places here in this country. When you talk about just mild forms of redress, and you've got that, and I'm going to say it, and maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to say it anyhow, sort of that handkerchief-head Negro who sits on the Supreme Court named Clarence Thomas, who agrees with those that try to dismantle what now is 50 years of affirmative action, trying to make little teeny progress in what was 400 years of affirmative action. There is an insanity in that. There is no intellectual substance or integrity in that argument whatsoever. What say you?
Well, that's kind of hard to follow. Again, it's about language, because what you describe, affirmative action gets a reaction from white people as something somehow people of color, black people in particular, are getting something that I can't get. And so that's how they hear that. When really what we would be talking about, you called it white affirmative action, really it's white privilege. And again, until we have kind of a same language and when we're talking about the same things, it's really hard for people to understand. It's hard for a lot of white people to understand that they walk this nation, very often this world, in a privileged zone. And so what that means, it's not about blame or shame, it's just how it is. That means if I'm white and I go into a store, well, ain't nobody looking at me thinking I'm gonna steal. You know, if I, go for a job and I'm white, then, I'm more likely to get that job. That's the reality. There have been lots of studies on this. If I go for an apartment or a home loan and I'm white, I'm more likely than a person of color to get that loan or to get that apartment because I walk with privilege in the society. One way that I try to explain it to white people, because the first thing that a lot of white people will say is, well, I don't have privilege. I'm working hard every day. I don't have any privilege. The thing I say to white people to help them understand it, it's the way I walk with privilege in this society as a straight woman. I like men. So I can be out at the bus stop and I can hug and kiss my man and I don't feel any threat. Nobody is looking at me and wants to beat me up or call me names because of that. I walk with privilege as a straight woman. If I were a gay woman and I did that same thing, I had my arm around a lover, a woman lover, and we kissed on the street, there may be people who would threaten me for that. They would threaten me for that. I couldn't do that.
Some people will say, let me get a better look.
So again, in describing that privilege, so that white people clearly understand, you walk with a privilege in this society that people of color don't have.
We run out of time. It's a privilege to have had you for this section. Thank you so much for being a part of the Rock Newman Show.
Thank you.
We will be back with Emily Griffin to answer all of your questions about parenting, how to be the best parent, how to be the best you so that you can be the best parent on the Rock Newman Show right after these messages.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back to the third hour of the Rock Newman Show today, November the 2nd, 2013. I am very, very happy to have as my guest this hour Emily Griffin. She is the founder of what is called Happy Parents, Happy Babies LLC. Now, after that last segment where we talked about race in America, I'm going to take the liberty with Emily that Emily is practicing what some folks call from the movie Jungle Fever. Emily is married to a black man, a white lady married to a black man. They got 4 beautiful sons. So, Emily, first of all, welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
Thank you.
Didn't necessarily plan to go there, but after that last segment, I thought it might be appropriate. Let me ask you. You're married to a black man.
Yes.
You have 4 babies. What, if any, have you any incidents of racism or racial consciousness that have you encountered in that experience? How long have you been married?
We have been married for a little over a year.
Okay.
We were together for about 8 years. We took our time. I'm part of a blended family. My first husband is also African American.
Okay.
Okay, and I would say that in high school, when I was with my first husband, that's where I dealt with the most outright aggression or negativity, criticism.
In what form? You get it from white side, black side, one side or the other? Or?
I would say more direct comments would be from other black students who, girls who would say, "Oh, you're taking."
Our black men. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. In college, we were in North Carolina for a couple of years, and we'd get some looks, but I'm very conscientious of raising children who have, I don't like to say biracial because we're all of one race, but I'm very conscious of the challenges that my sons may come across, and as a family, we are very aware of that and have nurtured a spirit in them so that they can feel good about themselves as unique individuals and also be prepared for facing certain things. Like, my oldest son is 13 now.
Right.
And, he's had comments from his friends sometimes like, "Oh, that's your mom?"
Right.
So not that, and some of his friends may not deal with that same question. So
you're in a unique position. Mm-hmm. You probably can understand better than most. We did a lot around the subject of the what I refer to as the murder of Trayvon Martin. Mm. And I talked about the horror that black mothers felt and the fear that they felt with about their sons, mm-hmm. that was unlike what white mothers in the white community might feel. But you're a white mother who has a son that could be Trayvon Martin. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did you feel during that experience, during that time?
Well, as a family, we were grieving. It was an awful, awful night to deal with that verdict, and I was just shocked. And I've always just connected with people, and have always tried to have empathy. And it doesn't take a whole lot of effort in that regard for me to connect with people, no matter what shade of skin they have or where they come from in the world. Mm-hmm. That kind of suffering is just awful, and I feel for Trayvon's parents, and I think we're
I'm hoping that we're at a place as a country where we can have really productive conversations and move our youth to a better place as well, so we can come together as a society.
All right, so let's start talking about happy parents, happy babies. How did you happen upon that title? And tell us about your experiences and your growth to get to this point.
Well, it's been quite a path for me. I would say that, in some ways I was very privileged and comfortable growing up, but we also had some very personal things that we struggled with mental illness in the family, and a lot of family conflict that I had to work through that my parents didn't quite know how to protect me from. And so dealing with all of those challenges, I had to build a resilience and use my resources. So I took to the comfort of friends who lived around the city. I spent a lot of time spending the night at my friends' houses and getting to know different families and makeups of them, and finding comfort from their parents as well. And so overcoming, I wound up having some significant losses in my life. Most importantly, my brother. He died when I was 16 after a long struggle with mental illness and self-medicating with drugs. There were a lot of traumatic incidents around that struggle that he had, that I watched him, and my parents have a hard time with trying to figure out how to meet his needs. So they couldn't quite tend to my needs in the way that I needed that to. So I learned a lot. I had to do a lot of healing. My social work education was a huge new chapter for me. It helped me to process a lot of those hurtful and confusing experiences.
Was your brother older than you?
He was. Yes. I'm sorry. He was 12 years older. And
and how old was he when he died?
He was 28.
So he was 28. So you're 10 years old, and you're watching your 20.
He was 28 and I was 16.
Yeah, but I'm.
Oh, you're saying.
Yeah. I'm saying, but as a kid, you're seeing and becoming aware of this incredible, struggle that is right within your family unit. Yeah. What do you remember as a child? How did that affect you most?
Well, I didn't understand it. Well, I guess when I look back, it's so hurtful to have that vision of my brother and clearly him crying out and having needs that were not met. And what really sticks with me is how I'm sure there were so many opportunities, along the way, that if my parents had the resources, if someone was able to work with them on who he was, what his needs were, and
meeting him where he was.
Exactly. Then, things could have been different. But I would say that in how I healed from the loss, it has really impacted for the better who I am as a parent.
Right.
I can really value my role in being deliberate with shaping who my children are, and allowing them to be who they are naturally and help nurture that and their sense of self-confidence and self-worth, what their purpose is, and I feel like that experience with him helped me to value every child more. And how they are a gift, and so I'm trying to translate. My passion comes from wanting to be able to help parents to cherish their gift that's here.
Well, part of what I found so fascinating and why I'm really happy that you're sitting there is because it is out of when we can take sort of snatch victory from defeat and take out of the personal tragedies that we experience a lesson that we then are able to internalize, heal, and then help make the world a little better place. That, I think, is, the best of all of the mission that we have. And you came from a place where you had, obviously, it wasn't just the death.
Right.
But it was a tragic dying process.
It was years of
that you experienced.
Torture, yes.
And you just said what I think is a key word. It was a torture.
It was.
And from that torture chamber of those years, you come out and you seek something and you actualize. And you deal with that pain, and it never fully goes away.
Right.
You heal. Mm-hmm. But you deal with that pain and then you start to offer something that can help other people mitigate circumstances that caused you such great pain. I want to give you a big round of applause for that.
Thank you.
And again, really, thank you for being here because you have very important guests. You're a very important guest for us to have on this show to impart to our listening audience. So let's start talking about your practice now.
Okay.
Healthy parents. How do you help parents become healthy?
Well, let me talk a little bit about my background and how I got to that
Please
place.
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after I got my social work education, you may not know, but part of when you're actually taking social work classes, you're also required to do internships. So I started getting my practice working with clients while I was also in school, because you have to be able to, start flexing those muscles to figure out how you're really going to meet the needs of clients. So I was working with kids in the juvenile probation system in Arlington. I worked with Metro DCP flag with helping to support families around GLBT support. And so so my first job when I actually came out of school was I worked with Child and Family Services, so working with families who either had their children removed from the home or were at risk of having their children removed from the home. Mm-hmm. So a lot of crisis support, but also trying to, I really wanted to not just focus on putting out fires, in crisis,
Sure.
but also prevent fires.
Proactive.
Yes,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
and that's always that's always been my natural instinct. Mm-hmm. So because that was my natural instinct, I felt it was time to I served my time, and it was valuable experience there.
Sure.
But working in the schools was something that was a major goal of mine after that. So I worked for 8 years in a charter school supporting students, namely adolescents and their families. Mm-hmm. And
now, when you say supporting them, define that support. Define the kind of support. Give us examples of what you did.
Individual counseling around things like grief and loss, building social skills, dealing with peer conflict, classroom management. There may be behaviors or academic support that's needed. There may be issues at home that are affecting what we're seeing at school, that are distracting them from doing their best.
Yeah.
So
pure conflict,
mm-hmm.
major
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
I remember going to the airport with my granddaughter. She was going on a trip from Las Vegas. They were going to New York City, and I had some connections. So I come in, being Big Papa, and come in, and there's a long line, and I knew some people, and I didn't have to wait in that line, and I took her by the hand, and started up to the front of the line, and she started pulling back, and I was like, well, what's up? We're going to go up here and, we're going to get ahead of the whole crowd. And she didn't want that. She didn't want, it was very important for her to fit in with her peers. Now, that's a mild example, but that was peer pressure. There's a certain peer pressure there. And part of what I found is the significant influence of peers, and what is the important for parents to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we did workshops along with the school psychologist. We did it together, interactive workshops, helping parents to understand how they can support, especially in this age, with kids being on Facebook on their phones and Twitter and Instagram. So you have this whole issue of documentation, you know, that we just didn't have. I would write a note and pass it. It may get to the wrong person, but at least it's just on a little piece of paper and it can be thrown away. You know, that is totally different now, and really helping the kids. That parents have to help kids understand how permanent these notes are, you know, and it's all documentation. It's going to come back to you, and kids, they'll hear it. They'll hear it if parents are deliberate from the beginning and limit that media use and limit the dependency, because I think that's part of it. You know, you have to help nurture other interests so that they're not always thinking and trying to sneak and find ways to get back on the computer or on the phone, you know, because you have to have that along with the limits, helping them understand.
I got to sneak into this commercial break right now. We're going to come back with Emily Griffin talking to you about parenting and how to rear productive model citizens on the Rock Newman Show in just a few moments.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to the Rock Newman Show. My guest this hour, Emily Griffin. Emily is someone who survived a childhood really being traumatized by a family situation where there was mental illness and ultimately self-medication by drugs that led to the untimely death of her brother at 28 years old. And sort of during that process, she was traumatized naturally, and But she came out of that process, out of that very tragic situation, with an interest and a desire to heal, one, and then to do something to help parents to be able to provide support, understanding, and clarity to their own children that would help mitigate the kind of trauma that she experienced. She went on to get an education to become a licensed social worker, and she's here with us today. She is the founder of Happy Parents, Happy Babies, and that is her company. And part of what you do today is you actually go into households talking to parents in familiar territory about the things that you want to help try to provide them to simply be better parents and better people.
Exactly. And, you know, just as I had my own process with, you know, understanding my past and how that influenced who I am today, and really healing from the things that needed to be healed, and also taking the positive, the strengths, and, you know, approaching that parenting with purpose and with a self-awareness that allows for a stronger attachment between myself and my children, and helping just strengthening that bond, you know, because that's so key with helping our kids get started, you know, off to the right start. So Happy Parents, Happy Babies is really about helping parents to build their sense of purpose and kind of discover actualize who they can best be as a parent, building on their individual strengths, processing and reflecting on their experiences, because often parents don't really think about, well, okay, I had these experiences as a child. They don't really impact me right now. But it comes out. They do. Yeah. They do. And if you don't do some work and in understanding how that does shape you, it's not that you can't have those experiences. We're all a mixed bag, you know, with and have had experiences.
Everybody got to say a story.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody got a hard story to tell. Sure.
Everybody has their hardships and their challenges, but what do you do with that? And you have to have that self-awareness to be the best parent that you can be. You have to hold that and not have a focus on perfectionism, you know, to be able to face your imperfections and to be honest in your parenting approach. I can work with parents to actualize who they are and be honest and build the strongest bond. Starting from, I have a client who was pregnant when she called me, and she was concerned. She had a history of some anxiety, and she was concerned about going to the hospital and what that experience was going to be. And she didn't want to. She understood that the baby could sense when she was overly anxious, and that's true. You know, you start that relationship when they're in the womb. And that's very real. So I helped her with processing that anxiety to help her feel more prepared and have some relaxation strategies to help her work through that anxiety. So when that experience did come, she could have, you know, she could focus on that bond with her baby and not be so worried about the external circumstances.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I really want to talk to you in depth, if we can, about the techniques that you've learned. I mean, because part of what we try to do here with every conversation, as you know, similar to Busboys and Poets' mission, is, you know, kind of changing the world one person at a time and one conversation at a time. The techniques that you have employed to help folks, I really want to get into that. Are your parents still alive?
They are.
Okay. Now, so you come into this awareness, and you now are teaching parents how to be better parents. Have you been able to communicate with your parents in a way that helps them, that ultimately may have strengthened or challenged your relationship with them?
Well, we've definitely come to a great place in our relationship with my father and with my mother. They also had her issues with mental illness. So they, I think everyone evolves.
Yeah.
If you...
Did you, going through that process as a child, you got to be 16, your brother didn't die, he died when he was 28 years old. Did you blame your parents?
I struggled with that. I didn't have any training in human behavior at that point, but my instincts told me, well, must have been something different that they could have done. So I did struggle with that a little bit, and but I think ultimately they did the best that they could. The mental health system still has a lot of progress to make, and at that time it certainly did. And so I think that was part of the struggle for sure. Yeah. They were trying to.
Were your parents like so many who tried to prevent the outside world from being aware of the struggles that they were experiencing with mental illness? I know many.
Yes.
I know many who do that to the detriment of the child they're trying to protect and to the family unit.
Yeah, well, I think, and part of that is, self-denial. There's so many families that wait until things are really bad before they ask for help. And, I was little. I was little when things were playing out. So my understanding of exactly how things went, I've had to kind of piece it together, talking to different family members. But, I think one thing I've taken away from that whole experience is that I think that's one of the reasons why I tend to approach things in such a proactive manner, I think, because I've seen how things can play out very vividly, if you're not taking a proactive approach. But on a positive note, my parents have a great relationship with my children. We've come to a very productive, happy place in my family. And I think part of it is how I've been able to process things. And just like every family, when you have your own children, you have to kind of set what your parenting approach is, and okay, grandma or grandpa, you have these things that you want to do, or certain ways you approach things, and you have to. There's a process to make that transition and adjustment. Everyone has that time to. Make that to figure out how you're going to be a family unit now that there's another generation at play.
So you talk a lot about parenting. You talk about purpose. Tell us about that.
Well, I really feel like everyone who is here for a reason, and that sense of spirituality stays with me, and I wear it on my sleeve passionately, and I think it comes out in the work that I do. It's really important to me to help parents, to help them understand that they do have great strengths, that sometimes it just in the day-to-day chaos, they don't even stop to appreciate themselves, and that lack of self-care that parents need to have for themselves, it impacts their connection with their child. So
are you saying a lack of self-care for themselves? In other words, you become a parent, sort of lose yourself trying to do everything for the kid, and so you lose yourself to your own detriment, and then to your kid's detriment. Is that what you're saying?
Right, exactly.
And how do you teach them to get that back?
Well, one analogy that a lot of healthcare what mental health providers use that I've heard at trainings that is very true is it's like, when you're on the airplane and they're showing you how to use the mask, and they tell you you have to put on your own mask before you reach to help a child or anyone else. You have to. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it works. You have to nurture your own spirit, no matter how many children you have, how many jobs you have. It cuts across socioeconomic groups or circumstances. You have to take care of yourself to be able to really be present in your relationship and connection with your family. And when parents can do that, it just makes such a big difference.
Let me ask you about this. One of these taboo subjects, incest. And what you, if any, you've experienced in dealing with the clients. That's a giant. People say sleeping giant, but that's a giant that never sleeps. It seems always lurking with those who've experienced it.
Well, what I find to be even more common is when, yes, you're right, it's an awful thing that people don't like to talk about, but many people have unfortunately dealt with. Right. And treatment is so important. It is. Yeah. What's even more common is a family friend or an uncle, someone who may not necessarily be the head of household, but someone who's spent time around that child. So that's why it's really important for parents to have conversations with their kids about safety and what safe touches are, and just making sure that they have those lines of communication.
And do you find that getting better now than previous time? Because obviously what you're talking about is so critically important, but you come in contact with, I come in contact with so many people and try to have open, candid conversation, and people don't necessarily do that. They're not. I don't understand the reasoning why that they're not inoculating their children with those kind of candid discussions. Oftentimes the reasoning given, excuse, call it what you will, is I don't want them thinking about that kind of thing. Well, you're leaving them exposed to something that you could be protecting them from.
That's true. That's true. And it's a great question, I think. And also part of it is just a matter of time too. There are very important conversations that parents need to have with their kids about everything from dealing with traffic, living in the city, to how to be a good friend, to how to deal with the media and what's appropriate to watch and what's not. There are conversations that are not being had because parents are preoccupied with their to-do lists, or they may be dealing with a stressful situation that's just draining them of energy, where they need to it needs to be directed towards their children too. So that's part of it. When you are able to carve out time and be deliberate with your self-care and approach things from a sense of self-awareness, then you are then in turn more emotionally available to connect with your child, and they feel that, and they're able to voice when they have real concerns, and then you can meet their needs better too.
Alicia Keys and Halle Berry, both black father, white mother, clearly identify as being black women. Now, they're biracial, but they clearly identify as being black women. Mm-hmm. You have sons by your white lady, by a black man. What's their identity? How will they identify?
Well, we talk with them and ultimately work with what they're comfortable saying, but we don't make it a major issue for them to feel self-conscious about. So, we work with where they are developmentally about it.
And what's the age range?
I have a 13-year-old, 7-year-old, 22 months, and 4 months.
So you got 4 full-time jobs in addition to this one and being white.
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk more with Emily Griffin when we come back on the Rock Newman Show. Today, November the 2nd, 2013. I'm going to give you some information when we come back about changing the clock. When did we change the clock this year? We'll talk about it when we come back after these messages.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back to the Rock Newman Show. This is our last segment today in the 11 o'clock hour. My guest is Emily Griffin. She is the founder of Happy Parents, Happy Babies. And the business is about helping you to become the best you so you can become the best parent. I want to make everyone aware that on next Saturday, we're going to do a special broadcast of the Rock Newman Show. It is going to be a broadcast that is done live on WHUT, Howard University Television, Channel 32. We will be broadcasting from 10 to 11 a.m. only, and we will have His Honor, the Mayor of Washington, D.C., Vince Gray. As you heard earlier by City Council Chairman Phil Mendelson, there is the expectation that somewhere around late next week, Thursday, Friday, maybe Saturday on the Rock Newman Show, who knows, Vince Gray will announce whether or not he's going to run for mayor or whether he's going to allow this one term to serve out and turn the reins over to someone else. So it's a big news around Washington, D.C., and the Rock Newman Show, Busboys and Poets, WHUT is going to be in the thick of that news as we host the mayor for a special broadcast of the Rock Newman Show, again, on WHUT, Channel 32, 10 to 11 a.m. next Saturday. Tell all your friends to tune in. Back now to my guest, Emily Griffin. Emily, let's talk about what you do. You talk to a parent, you do an assessment and decide that it's time, or they decide, really, it's time for them to get some coaching, some help. Because you know what? There's not a manual. You know, you talked about your situation of being a child growing up in a home with mental illness issues in the family, drug abuse issues in the family. You've come out as a mother of 4, running a successful business, and your brother met an untimely demise. And oftentimes there is the question, how could one child be so dramatically different from the next? There's really no clear-cut prescription how to raise a child, how to rear a child. So, walk me through the process where you assess a parent's needs, you go in. Take me through that process.
Sure. Well, some families, because of either health concerns or mobility, travel, maybe they're just too busy. It makes more sense for me to come to them rather than them going to an office to see a therapist. So I go to their home, no cleaning up needed. I'm very down to earth, and that's one thing that I make sure parents know, that I'm very, they can just be comfortable.
Sure.
So, because part of it too is me being able to just see what their natural environment is, and how they've set up the household for themselves and their kids, what their routine is. So I might spend a little time just observing how they're interacting with their kids, and it depends on what the situation is. Like I said, I'll work with expectant parents as well, so maybe they're just trying to be proactive, and they might have some concerns about their past that they don't want to interfere with having a healthy attachment and a nice healthy relationship with their child. So we can be proactive and process some of those things that they experienced and what their intentions are, so that they can address their fears. We can address those fears together with techniques around mindfulness, that's something that's been used a lot, that's gotten a major spotlight recently.
So techniques around mindfulness, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So mindfulness is essentially focusing on the present. It's the ability to accept the past, accept what could possibly happen in the future, and be able to focus on the present in a calm, enjoyable way. And, people, it sounds harder than, it's harder than it sounds for
I was about to say,
many people.
I was
Yes,
about to
it's
say
harder
just
than
that.
it sounds.
Right, sure.
But it's honestly, it's something that has changed my life and helped me to be more present with my children, actively in the present, and it's helped me.
So you've gotten there.
Yes.
You've gotten there.
Yes.
How did you get there?
I've used those techniques. There are techniques that you can use when you have a trigger, when there's something that is particularly stressful for you. It includes things like meditation and using positive things for you to say to yourself instead of negative thoughts that keep you in that cycle. It's been used for not only things like anxiety and improving your mental state around if you're suffering from depression, but also physical things. I was suffering from chronic physical illness, and I am at a much better place with managing that, as well as anxious thoughts. I'm just in such a happier place. So when I chose to name my business Happy Parents, Happy Babies, I was really claiming my victory personally, and stepping into helping other parents from a very passionate place, coming through quite a journey. So those techniques, it depends on, it's a very individualized process, because everyone has sensitive spots that can trigger, angry responses to their child, and they wonder, well, where is that coming from? I wish I didn't say that. Before they know it, they got their buttons pushed and they didn't step back before it happened. So helping parents to address patterns, and especially if there are patterns from when they were a child that they don't want to repeat. That's why I focus on families with younger children, or even if they haven't had their child yet, but adapting to having a new baby, really focusing on helping families to get off to the best start. Because if we can be proactive and process all of those experiences that make you who you are, then you can enjoy your family more, even if you feel like you don't have the time to take care of yourself and to have quality experiences with your families. It can be done, and we figure it out together.
On my social media sites, when I said you were coming on, one of the raging debates that got started was to spank or not to spank. Spare the rod or whip that ass. Which, and I'm telling you, there was some very powerful, compelling arguments on both sides of that coin. Where do you stand?
I'll say this. Having high expectations and a high level of nurturing is what combines to be what's called the authoritative parenting style. And that's what tends to have the best positive outcomes.
Break that down for me.
Okay? So you want to be consistent with what your expectations are. You don't want to come from a place. See, in my experience, oftentimes when parents have hit their child, it's out of anger and frustration. Okay? I've known people who've grown up who have gotten a couple of cracks on their butts, but in a methodical way, and they seem to be just fine. Okay? But when we are lashing out at our children because we're not dealing with our emotional needs, we have to remember they're kids, right? And they're going to test limits, they're going to test boundaries, but they really want to please you. They really do. And they start out that way. And when you establish that trusting, strong bond from the beginning, it makes things a lot easier moving forward. It really does. So then you're not even in. When people have asked me, have I hit my kids? I've never felt the need to. So that I haven't.
You've been touched.
I haven't.
You've been touched. Yeah. No, I understand.
Because it's how I've intentionally approached parenting from the beginning and how I deal with things along the way. Okay, sometimes parents do too much talking when they need to go take a time out for themselves. Okay? And sometimes they don't talk enough. So it's about really figuring out, like tuning into your child to figure out what is this behavior about? Because chances are there's something like maybe you haven't spent enough time together recently, There could be something going on at school. There could be just something on his or her mind that needs to be addressed that's behind the behavior.
I think the whole idea of spanking, not spanking is in part a generational thing. Most people in my generation talk about the whippings they used to get. Not just the kind of whippings on a regular basis, but when you really kind of think about how part of that whipping came, was like, okay, old Richard Pryor joke, go out there and get me a switch and bring that switch back so, I can whip up on you. Most that I know that are my age, my friends in my generation, got a whole bunch of whippings.
Yeah.
I really only got smacked on the butt hard, really one time, and I don't know what got into my nephew and I, but we were out beside the road, and it was, summertime, it was hot, we had shorts on. I never heard of mooning, but we were pulling our pants down, and my mom came and tore us up. Mm-hmm. That was the only whipping that I got. Now, I'm 61. Let's talk 30 people who are like 30 years old. It's very much, that's where the debate seems to rage in a younger generation about whether or not to, spare that rod. Now, what you just said makes a whole lot of sense. And so there needs to probably be a whole lot more of you practicing what you practice and teaching people how to establish the kind of relationship with children where there is not the need for spanking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not that you're not, I'm not saying I haven't had challenging moments.
Yeah.
I've had plenty of moments where I've had to just stop myself and go take some deep breaths. Mm-hmm. Everybody has those times.
Discipline is clearly still a need.
Yes, but I mean, but the thing is, one thing that's very important to me in my household is we reinforce self-discipline very early, before I think a lot of parents realize that their kids can start showing it.
How do you do that? How do you help children to establish self-discipline?
So part of it is recognizing, paying attention to cues that your kids give you, okay? Mm-hmm. So my toddler, we know when it's time for him to go to sleep, okay? He'll get kind of goofy with his energy. Right. The food he'll stop playing with this food after he kind of goes through stages. He'll eat it, and then a little while later he's playing with it, and then before we know it, okay, maybe a couple of things are on the floor. Okay, you're getting down and you're picking up your food, washing your hands, and you're going to sleep. Mm-hmm. Because we know that you're at that point,
and with this is the 13-month? He's
22 months old.
22 months. 22 months. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so we talk to him, though. He can understand a lot more than he can say. Yeah. And he's starting to know when he's tired. Uh-huh. So we don't get a lot of pushback with nap time or with bedtime. He's in a toddler bed already, and there were a couple of times he'd get off as he was exploring it, but we were very deliberate and calm with our approach with getting him there. So he's starting to understand that there are basic needs that he has. Yeah. And when they're not met, he acts kind of goofy, and he'll show us with his behavior that, okay, it's time for rest. Yeah. So having basic things like that, you have to make time for your kids. There are a lot of kids who do not get enough sleep, who don't have their nutritional needs met, mm-hmm. who are spending too much time on electronics and not enough time with real toys and playing outside, or just playing, with tactile things, real crayons instead of putting your finger on the screen. These things are so important for their basic development. So I can help parents with getting the basics back.
Let me tell you, once someone wrote in and they said, please ask her. I've got 18-year-old twins who've just been a joy. I have a 12-year-old. She went to bed one night and she said, Mommy, I love you. Thank you for being my mom. You're the greatest mom in the world. I'm so happy to be your daughter. And she woke up the next day acting as if she had been touched by something that jumped out of the Megan, whatever her name was, in The Exorcist. That teenage girl that just trips out. And I've got a lot of nieces in my family, and I've seen them be the doll baby one day, and then they wake up the next day, and they are hellions. What happens to teenage girls?
Teenagers are dealing with a whole lot of hormones and identity crisis in motion. You know, they sometimes they don't know what often they don't know what they're doing, and they really do. Often when they're acting out, they're asking for more structure and more limits, but they don't even realize that that's what they're doing necessarily.
In their behavior, that is a cry for more structure and more discipline.
They need it. They need it so much, especially now with, you know, how damning their actions in media can be. You know, they really need that secure place to fall with their parents. Or, you know, some nurturing adult. It can also be, you know, as they become teenagers, they build their support system outside of home too.
This time has gone by very fast. We have a minute left here. What would be, your parting words to parents who are searching for that way to help their children become the best they can be? And now what we have, probably about 30 seconds.
Well, I want to say first, thank you so much for having me. I love DC. I love the families of DC, and I'm so happy to be serving. Go to my website, happyparentshappybabies.com, and I'm building it. I'll be adding tips. Please email me if you have any questions related to development. I'm happy to offer you resources. Even if I don't have the answer offhand, I'll send you to the right place.
Well, that was said just like a veteran in the business. Thank you so much for coming. Hopefully you have helped. We try to help at the Rock Newman Show. Make the world a better place, one day at a time, one conversation at a time.
Thank you.
And you have helped us here today. Folks, don't forget, next week, 10 to 11 a.m., Mayor Vincent Gray on the Rock Newman Show. Will he run or will he not run? We may find out next week. Tune in. Channel 32 WHUT. We'll be right here at Busboys and Porch. You can come down and join us for breakfast. This has been a great day. Good to spend it with you. God bless you until we see you next week.